Welcome back to Crime Story, where today we bring you a spine-chilling true crime story that will haunt you long after the video ends. What started as a routine cleaning session in a basement, led to the discovery of a dark secret that had been hidden in plain sight for over 30 years. This is the story of an unsolved mystery, a steel drum, and the deadly secret it held for decades, waiting to be uncovered. It was in September 1999 when Ronald Cohen, preparing to move out of his home in Jericho, New York, stumbled upon a large steel drum tucked away in his basement. This barrel had been there ever since he moved into the house 9 years earlier, but he had never once thought to open it. On a whim, thinking it was time to dispose of it, Ronald pried open the lid. What he found inside was far from ordinary. It was the body of a woman, preserved in a strange blue liquid. But this wasn't just any body. As investigators soon discovered, the woman had been pregnant when she died, and her body had been preserved for decades. This chilling discovery would send shockwaves through the small community, and what followed would unravel a twisted tale of murder, lies, and a buried secret. For over 3 decades, the woman's body had been sitting quietly in that basement, its existence known to no one, hidden in a steel drum, the very symbol of a crime so dark that it could have remained concealed forever. What was the identity of this woman? Who killed her? And why was her death kept in the shadows for so long? These questions would lead to a trail of shocking revelations, a long-forgotten affair, and the twisted mind of a man whose secret would finally come to light after 30 years. So, prepare yourself for this chilling story, as we dive deep into the mystery of the steel drum and the woman who was hidden inside it, her death a cruel secret left to haunt the house and its past owners. Stay tuned, because the truth behind this decades-old crime is even more twisted than you can imagine. On September 2, 1999, as Ronald Cohen was preparing to move out of his home in Jericho, New York, he stumbled upon something that would forever change the course of his life and the lives of those involved in this chilling tale. It was a large steel drum tucked away in the corner of the basement, forgotten and unseen for nearly a decade. It had been there since Ronald first moved in, and with the moving process underway, he figured it was finally time to dispose of it. But there was a problem. The movers, after trying to lift the heavy barrel, refused to move it, insisting that it was too cumbersome. This struck Ronald as odd. Curious and eager to get rid of the nuisance, he decided to take matters into his own hands. With little hesitation, he opened the lid of the barrel, expecting it to be some kind of old, unwanted junk. What he found inside, however, would haunt him for the rest of his life. A woman's body preserved in a strange blue liquid greeted him. Her features were intact, though her skin had a strange pallor, and the blue liquid suggested that she had been preserved in some kind of chemical substance. The body was not fully decomposed, indicating that the woman's death had happened not long ago. But the discovery only became more disturbing when investigators arrived on the scene. The authorities were immediately called, and they quickly determined that what they were dealing with was no simple case of neglect or accidental death. As they carefully examined the body, they uncovered something that sent a chill down their spines. The woman was pregnant, very far along in her pregnancy. This wasn't just a random act of violence. It was a calculated, brutal act. Someone had planned this, someone had gone to great lengths to conceal this crime, and for over 30 years, it had remained hidden in that steel drum, left to rot in plain sight. The police investigation began immediately, but what they found was even more unsettling. Aside from the woman's remains, they found personal belongings and items associated with the woman, suggesting that this wasn't just a random, isolated event. The preservation method, using the blue chemical, was a clear indication of a deliberate attempt to conceal the evidence, to make the body last longer than it would have under normal circumstances. But the most chilling part of this discovery was the mystery that surrounded it. Who was this woman? How did she end up in that steel drum? The answer would take investigators on a journey full of twists and turns, uncovering long-buried secrets and revealing a dark and twisted story that had been concealed for decades. The body, locked away for 30 years, was just the tip of the iceberg, and what lay ahead would change everything. The steel drum, a symbol of this brutal crime, stood silently in the basement, waiting for the right moment to reveal its deadly secret. And in that moment, everything changed. What had started as an ordinary day in the life of a homeowner became the unraveling of a decades-old murder mystery, one that had been hiding in plain sight all along. The discovery of the woman's body in the steel drum sent shockwaves through the small community of Jericho, New York. What initially seemed like a puzzling and tragic mystery soon turned into a chilling investigation with far-reaching implications. As investigators delved deeper into the details, each new clue painted a darker and more disturbing picture of what had happened. The autopsy of the woman's body revealed horrifying details that only added to the complexity of the case. Not only had she been the victim of brutal blunt force trauma to the head, but investigators also made an even more shocking discovery: she was pregnant very far along in her pregnancy. This fact alone shifted the entire scope of the investigation, suggesting that this was no random act of violence. The woman had been murdered, but the presence of her unborn child raised the stakes, adding a layer of tragedy and malice to the crime. As the investigation progressed, authorities began to focus on the steel drum itself. The serial number on the side of the barrel pointed them in the direction of a chemical supplier, which led them to a local company specializing in synthetic materials. Strangely, the blue liquid in which the body was preserved was found to be a common dye used in the production of artificial flowers, materials that were often sold to the same industry. This detail was strange but telling. It was not a typical preservative. It seemed the killer had been meticulous, using this unusual chemical to preserve the body, perhaps in an attempt to delay discovery or simply out of a desire to keep the crime hidden for as long as possible. The investigation began to zero in on Howard Elkins, the man who had owned the house where the body was found. Elkins had been the co-owner of a company that manufactured plastic flowers, a business closely linked to the synthetic materials discovered in the drum. As the police worked through the evidence, they found disturbing connections between Elkins and the woman who had died inside the barrel. An anonymous tip came in, suggesting that Elkins had once had an affair with a young Hispanic woman who had worked at his factory. This woman was later identified as Reyna Marroquin. Reyna, a woman who had come to the United States from El Salvador in search of a better life, had gone missing in 1969, just a year before the discovery of the body. She had contacted a friend in a panic, fearing that Elkins was going to kill her. The friend attempted to alert the police, but with no concrete information, the case never progressed, and Reyna disappeared without a trace. Her fate had remained a mystery until now, but the link between Reyna's disappearance and the body in the drum seemed undeniable. As the investigation gained traction, the chilling truth began to emerge. Reyna had been in a relationship with Elkins, and when she discovered she was pregnant, she confronted him, demanding that he take responsibility for the child. But instead of acknowledging his wrongdoing, Elkins chose a far darker path. He decided to eliminate the woman who threatened to expose his secret. Investigators now believed that Elkins lured Reyna to his factory under some pretense, likely with the intention of confronting her. What followed was an act of calculated violence. Elkins murdered Reyna and placed her body into a steel drum, sealing her fate in a macabre effort to cover up his crimes. But the investigation did not stop there. The more they uncovered, the more questions arose. What happened in the years between Reyna's disappearance and the discovery of the body? Why did it take so long for the truth to surface? And perhaps most chilling of all, how had Elkins managed to keep such a horrifying secret hidden for over 3 decades, living a life seemingly free from suspicion? These were the questions that plagued investigators as they worked to piece together the full story behind the woman in the barrel and the man who would soon become their prime suspect. The true horror of Reyna Marroquin's fate slowly began to unfurl as investigators dug deeper into the twisted layers of Howard Elkins' actions. It became clear that this was no spur-of-the-moment crime, this was a cold, calculated act carried out with chilling precision. On the fateful night Reyna vanished, Elkins had lured her to his factory under the guise of resolving their issues. She was a young woman scared, vulnerable, and alone, believing that she could convince Elkins to take responsibility for their unborn child. Little did she know, Elkins had already made up his mind to silence her forever. At the factory, Elkins took matters into his own hands, ending Reyna's life with calculated brutality. He then set out to make sure there would be no trace of her. Instead of acting out of panic, Elkins' methodical behavior showed he had planned this carefully. He placed her lifeless body inside a steel drum, one that would come to hold the evidence of his dark secret for years. But this was only the beginning of his attempt to cover his tracks. In a sinister move, Elkins filled the drum with plastic pellets, hoping that the added weight would cause the barrel to sink once it was disposed of in the ocean. The idea was simple: drown the evidence, and Reyna's body would be swallowed by the sea, never to be found. But his plan quickly went awry. The drum became too heavy, far heavier than he had anticipated. Instead of sinking, it became an immovable object. Elkins, realizing the barrel was far too cumbersome to carry to the ocean, made a decision that would lead to the barrel's long-hidden secret. He stashed it away in his basement. For over 3 decades, the steel drum remained concealed in that basement, a grim and forgotten relic of a life brutally taken. All the while, Elkins continued his life, moving on as if the haunting murder of Reyna had never happened. He left behind Long Island and relocated to Florida, where he tried to bury the horrific crime in the deepest corners of his mind. He started anew, distancing himself from the man he had once been. It was as though he believed that time could erase the truth. But time, as it often does, had other plans. While Elkins built a new life, the drum stayed put, waiting silently in the basement, hiding the gruesome truth. For decades, the barrel served as a silent guardian of Reyna's fate, her life and death sealed inside it. In the years that followed, Elkins would live in peace, surrounded by a new family and a quiet life in Florida, all the while carrying the heavy weight of his past. Little did he know, though, that his dark secret would eventually be uncovered in the most unexpected of ways. The drum would not remain hidden forever. And when it was discovered, it would be the beginning of the unraveling of a story that had been buried for far too long. It was a story of betrayal, murder, and a lifetime of trying to outrun a crime that would never truly be buried. Reyna's life, taken so violently and hidden so cruelly, would finally be brought into the light, forcing Elkins to face the terrifying consequences of his actions. The investigation had finally cornered Howard Elkins. Detectives tracked him down to Boca Raton, Florida, where he had spent the last years of his life far from the events that had haunted him. By now, Elkins was a man in his 70s, living quietly in retirement, but the weight of his past was about to catch up with him. The once confident businessman who had once controlled his own fate was now a suspect in a cold and brutal crime that had gone unsolved for decades. When investigators confronted him, Elkins remained eerily calm. He denied any connection to the body in the drum, stubbornly refusing to offer any cooperation. They asked for a DNA sample to link him to the unborn child found inside the barrel, but Elkins refused, determined to take his secret to the grave. His actions and refusal to comply only deepened the suspicion surrounding him, and investigators knew they had to find another way to prove his guilt. But Elkins wasn't going to give up his secrets so easily. Less than a day after his encounter with detectives, he was found dead in his garage. The police arrived at the scene to discover that Elkins had taken his own life, ending his days in a tragic and self-inflicted manner. He had been the one to decide how his story would end on his terms, not theirs. Though Elkins' death meant that he would never stand trial for the murder of Reyna Marroquin, investigators were not about to let him escape justice completely. A DNA sample was taken from the scene, and it would be the final key in unlocking the truth. The results confirmed the worst: the unborn child found in the barrel was indeed Elkins' child. The chilling reality set in. Howard Elkins, a man who had tried to bury his past, had been the father of the innocent life taken so violently. The brutal truth was now undeniable. The mystery, which had puzzled investigators for so long, was finally solved. But even as they pieced together the horrific story, the sense of closure felt strangely hollow. Elkins had evaded true justice. His decision to end his life before he could face trial meant that the full measure of justice would never be served for Reyna or her unborn child. As the detectives left Florida, the case closed in a bittersweet resolution. Elkins was gone, but the pain, the secrets, and the lives he had destroyed could never be erased. The steel drum, which had silently guarded the secret for over 30 years, would forever stand as a haunting reminder of a life cut short and the twisted actions of a man who thought he could bury the truth but found, in the end, that the truth would never stay hidden forever. For over 3 decades, Howard Elkins walked free, living a life far removed from the chilling truth buried deep in his past. He had carefully crafted a facade of normalcy, moved to Florida, and settled into retirement, all the while carrying the weight of a horrific crime that he thought he could leave behind. The once active businessman, co-owner of a plastic flower company, had managed to bury not just a body, but the truth of his dark deeds, allowing it to sit undisturbed in his basement for years. The steel drum, an object so ordinary to so many, became the silent witness to a gruesome crime. Tucked away in a forgotten corner of the basement, it was passed from one homeowner to the next, each one unknowingly harboring a dark secret. To anyone who saw it, it was just another old, heavy drum, not worth a second thought. But to Elkins, it was much more, a tool for a twisted cover-up, a vessel that concealed the remnants of a life he had destroyed. When Ronald Cohen discovered the drum while preparing to move out of the house in 1999, the truth began to unravel. The moment the lid was opened, the horror that had been hidden for over 3 decades was exposed. A pregnant woman's body, preserved in blue liquid, awaited discovery, a gruesome testament to a violent crime that had long been buried. The shocking revelation was more than just a murder, it was a life interrupted, an innocent child lost, and a man's desperate attempt to erase the past. Elkins' carefully constructed life began to crumble as investigators delved into his past, and with every piece of evidence uncovered, the scale of his actions became clearer. What had begun as an affair with a young, vulnerable woman had spiraled into a heinous act of violence. When Reyna Marroquin discovered she was pregnant, she demanded that Elkins take responsibility, but instead of admitting his wrongdoing, Elkins chose to silence her forever. The truth of what happened that fateful night in 1969 was finally revealed through painstaking investigation. Elkins had lured Reyna to his factory under the guise of discussing their future. What followed was a brutal attack. Reyna was murdered, and her body was disposed of in the steel drum that would eventually end up in the basement, hidden from the world. Elkins, in a futile attempt to dispose of the evidence, filled the drum with plastic pellets, hoping to weigh it down and sink it into the ocean. But the drum proved too heavy, and instead, it became an artifact of Elkins' dark secret, silently waiting to be discovered. For years, Elkins lived with the weight of his crime, believing he could escape it, that the past would never catch up with him. He continued his life, running a business, starting a new chapter in Florida, and growing old with the burden of his secret. But in the end, the truth could not be hidden forever. What was meant to be concealed in plain sight for eternity was finally uncovered, not by the hands of detectives alone, but by the curiosity of a homeowner cleaning out a basement. Elkins' life was forever marked by his actions, and his past could never be fully erased. Though the case was solved, the community was left with a haunting reminder that even in the most seemingly ordinary places, horrific secrets can remain hidden for years. The steel drum, the key to this dark tale, stood as an eerie monument to a crime that had once slipped through the cracks of time until it was finally uncovered, bringing justice not just to the victim, but to the memory of a crime that had been hidden in plain sight for far too long. The story of Reyna Marroquin's tragic fate, hidden for decades in a steel drum, serves as a haunting reminder of the darkness that often lurks beneath the surface of ordinary lives. The cruel actions of Howard Elkins, a man who chose to silence the truth by ending Reyna's life and hiding her body in a drum, are chilling. His attempt to cover up his violent act only made it all the more sinister when, decades later, the truth came to light. The discovery of the steel drum, buried deep in a basement, and the horrifying secret it contained, is a tale of unimaginable cruelty that forever changed the lives of those involved. Elkins' decision to kill Reyna, his affair, and the consequences that followed make this case even more disturbing. The steel drum, which was intended to be a tool to hide the crime, became a prison for Reyna's memory, locked away in plain sight, passed through the hands of unsuspecting homeowners, only to be discovered when it was too late for justice to be fully served. Elkins' death, while it brought some closure, left behind unanswered questions. What truly drove him to murder the woman he had an affair with? Was it the weight of his actions? Or was it something more deeply rooted in his psyche? As this case comes to a close, we are left with lingering thoughts about the lengths some people will go to hide their darkest secrets. The steel drum may have served as a container for the truth, but the mystery surrounding the crime, the motives, and the life that followed remains with us, a constant reminder that some stories are buried far deeper than we think, waiting for the right moment to come to light. And even then, some truths may never fully be understood. If you found this story chilling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories. What do you think of the events that transpired? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay safe, and stay vigilant.